everybody. Welcome to the 2021 webinar panel discussion titled World of Work 2021, What's Next? I want to first thank PMG, Performance Management Group, with VCU for helping us out for this webinar today. My name is Darren Moore. I'm the Director for Planning and Finance with the Virginia Department of Wildlife Resources, and also currently serve as president of the Virginia Executive Institute Alumni Association. And I want to thank Tashawn and the Commonwealth Management Association, the CMI Alumni Organization, for inviting us, VEI alumni, to participate in today's webinar and panel discussion. And like you, I'm sure we're all looking forward to some of the additional opportunities and discussion points that we can take away from today, and an opportunity to learn opportunities or learn ways to bring back to our workplace some of these helpful hints and ideas that we all want to implement. So with that, I will turn it over to Sean to say a few words about CMA and the panel as well.
Thank you, Darren. Good morning, everyone. I'm Tashawn Harris-Ugorgi. I'm the president of CMA. Welcome to our annual meeting. I am going to be the person behind the scenes, so bear with me as this is my second webinar. But we are looking forward to our guest, Dr. Sales, who will be speaking today regarding the what's next in terms of returning to work. And we will also have our panel guests who will be speaking on moving onward. And this is our agenda for today. So we will have our welcome and introductions. As well, we'll have the introduction of the speaker by Sharita Davis Bryant, our PMG consultant. And we'll then hear from Dr. Sales with effective management and flexibility in the era of COVID. Then we will have a stretch break, and then we will move onward with our panel discussion. And then after our panel discussion, we will close to transition to our CMA annual meeting. So at this time, I'm going to ask for Sharita to come forward.
Okay, great. Thank you, Tashawn. Good morning, everyone. As Tashawn mentioned, I'm Sharita Davis Bryant from PMG. I'm glad to be here with you this morning. And I have the pleasure of introducing a good friend of mine for, I won't tell you how many years, Dr. Tremaine Sales. I won't tell him how old we really are. So he is a wonderful human being who never sleeps. And I'll tell you more about that in terms of his bio, but today he'll be talking to you about effective management and flexibility in the era of COVID. We all know that COVID has brought many changes to our world, and we've had to endure a ton of things and a lot of changes, a lot of obstacles, and there have been a lot of psychological stresses on our families and modifications in our workplace. So, and as managers, many have had to adjust to offer accommodations to staff while trying to complete the mission of their particular unit. And so the presentation today will offer some practical steps for all of you as leaders to assist in navigating the pitfalls of supporting staff while consistently producing deliverables and ensuring the achievement of the mission of your organizations. So it's a wonderful topic and very timely. And I said that Dr. Sales never sleeps because he was born in New York. So we're both from New York, which is wonderful. And he's earned degrees from Duke University, Columbia Universities, and St. John's University. And he's held multiple high-level positions, including being assigned as a senior behavioral health officer in the U.S. Army Reserve, assigned at the Pentagon. Dr. Sales was the director of counseling services unit for the FDNY before becoming the director of CSU for the NYPD. He is also affiliated with multiple colleges and universities and is a national speaker in the field of behavioral health and substance abuse. He is now a retired Army veteran, having served 26 years between active and reserve duty. So we thank you for your service, Dr. Sales. And he also teaches as an adjunct faculty member in psychology and substance abuse at our at local colleges and universities in New York. He is also a married father of 4 who enjoys running, martial arts, triathlons, and baking macaroni and cheese. And I'm not convinced he can cook, but that's what he says. So anyway, that's why I say he never sleeps, but he's a wonderful human, and he's been a great help to us on our Thursday programs, talking to leaders across the state. So Dr. Sales, thank you for being with us this morning. And with that, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you very much for that introduction. And I will freeze dry and mail you some mac and cheese. I promise. You'll get some. You'll get some. I'll get it there because I know you know we're in New York. But thank you very much. Thank you. Good morning. Welcome everyone to this meeting. And first, I have to begin with a disclaimer. In part due to what Sharita just said, I work with a lot of different groups. However, today, please understand the views expressed on my own and are my own, and in no way is a representation of, endorsement of, or approved by, acknowledged by, nor have anything to do with anyone else but me. So I am not here on behalf of the New York City Police Department, the United States Army, the Department of Defense. I own a college, Talkspace, Headway, or anybody else who I might have worked with or an affiliation with. The ideas that are expressed are my own and the intellectual property of Dr. Tremaine Sales and Dr. Tremaine Sales alone. So today it's just me, not all those other illustrious organizations I work for. So with that, Tishan, do you happen to have the slide deck? Is the slide deck available? If not, that's no problem. I have it, but I wasn't sure if it was going to be shared with everyone else as I go along. I don't want to get ahead of myself.
Okay, let's see here. Hold on. Can you see it now? Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Okay. There you go. Go ahead.
Okay. So next slide, please. Okay. So my background is both in behavioral health and strategic planning with the U.S. military, as was stated earlier. So I always like to start with, I think organizations need to begin by having a programmatic assessment. So if you're going to talk about where you are today and where you want to go, it's imperative that you begin by having a clear understanding, some metrics of where your organization is. Exactly how many people are remote, how many on site, what was your policy pre-COVID, and why was that the policy? And I think it's important to look at the performance and productivity of your organization. And that's why I talk about beginning at the beginning, doing a program assessment. And I'm going to talk a lot about quantitative measures, performance standards, performance reviews, being empirically based, having a data set from which to begin a movement, because we're going through a transition. And if we want to know that we're effective in the transition, then we really need to know where we are clearly and be able to articulate that in numbers, as well as where we want to be. So next slide. Where do you need to be? What is the organization's strategic plan? This is the time to kind of begin to pull out and dust off that 3-year, 5-year plan. For a lot of us, COVID has kind of set us back, and a lot of the things we formerly did stopped. So that's another reason why it's important to take a look at where you are and where you want to go, what your strategic plan is, because in part, even pre-COVID, you may not have been on track with that plan. But it's important to look at when you talk about that plan and you move to a different trajectory because our trajectory is off, why are we going in the direction that we're going in? Is it because that's how we always used to do it? Is it because that's how we were told it should be? Is it because, well, this is what we always do? All too often in organizations, I hear someone say something like, well, I'll use the Army as an example, or company ABC. Well, this is company ABC, and that's how company ABC does it. And so I always ask to be empirically based, that who at company ABC? Who told you that? Where is it written down that you must do it that way? Because all too often we hear, that's how we always used to do it. And as an example, in my years with working with the FDNY, a firefighter who was a good colleague of mine told me a story about how back in the 80s, firefighters would go out, they'd leave their firehouse, go out, put out a fire, come back into the firehouse and hose down the tires of their fire truck. This is in the 1980s. So they go out, put out fires, come back, hose down the tires. And they did this until at some point someone said, well, you know, why are we washing the tires? Why are we doing this? And of course, the answer was, well, that's how we always used to do it. We've always washed on the tires when we've come back into the firehouse. So they actually did some research only to find out that this comes from the almost 1800s when they had horses pulling their water pumps. And of course, because horses were pulling water pumps, the wheels of the water pump might roll through horse manure. So when they would bring that water pump back into the house, they had to wash down the wheels to wash the manure off of the wheels of their water pump. This is what they did from the 1800s. But here they are with fire engines and rubber tires, and they're still doing it because that's how we always used to do it, without doing any analysis as to why they're doing what they're doing, whether it's important, whether it's worthwhile. Simply, this is how we always used to do it. So as we transition from doing things a certain way to going back to how we formerly did it, it should be something other than, well, that's how we've always performed, because how you've always performed isn't necessarily effective. Again, is going back into the workplace productive, or are there other methods? So what I recommend is when you're looking at that strategic plan, start with the end in mind, think about where you want to be, and then backwards plan. How do I get to that end? Next slide. So one of the things I know organizations are doing, which is amazing, the senior leaders, CEOs, C-suite folks will say, well, this is what we're going to do. We're going to leave it to the department heads to figure out what they want to do. I'm not going to unilaterally make a decision. I'm going to say, I'll leave it to our bureau chiefs, division heads, department heads, and I'll let them decide. Well, when you do that, each department, each division, each bureau ends up doing something a little bit different. And then you run into issues with that, especially if you work for city, state, or federal organization. You have people in union-based titles. So now someone in human resources who works as a clerical associate, or someone in maintenance who works as a mechanic, is working from home, and someone with that same title has to come into the office every day. So as this gets delegated, I think it's also important to kind of go down to some of the lower levels, get in the weeds just a little bit for a second, and look at some of the titles. What titles are asking people to do which things? Are these things that can be done from home, can be done from a different location? Or is that a title that needs to be done in the workplace if we're going to make this transition back? And if so, if we're saying, and this is where it gets tricky, you have a title that needs to do your work in the office. Well, somebody else has the same title, in theory, is performing the same duties, but that person are doing those duties from home. So wait a minute, why is it that my title requires me to be at work and that title if we're doing the same things? So I think it's important, if bureau heads, department chiefs, division leaders are going to be given a certain level of leeway, they kind of come together at their level and talk to each other about who's doing what and who's being permitted to do certain things. Reasonable accommodations are going to come in. Some people are going to be entitled to reasonable accommodations. There are going to be individual differences. I think this is also where performance reviews come in. You may have one person in one title who works from the office and another person in that title who works from home doing the same things, but it comes back to one person needs more supervision than another. I can't permit this person to work from home because they're not going to get their work done. However, if you're going to say that, it's important to have performance reviews and data to back up what you're saying so you can make a reasonable analysis of the information you have in front of you. And I know performance reviews, writing things up, writing things down can be sticky for some folks, but it's one of the things that we've all needed to do as managers at some point or another so that we can have data about some of these things. Again, this gets back to quantitative measures. This gets back to making sure there's data if we're making decisions, so we're not being told that we're making decisions in a vacuum, making decisions unilaterally, making decisions that are biased or against any one person in particular. Next slide, please. I've often said a good leader can make reasonable exceptions to general rules. Again, looking at productivity increases, quantitative measures, performance reviews, even location changes. I had an assistant years ago. I'm going to say her name was Lisa. And Lisa lived in Staten Island, but worked with me in Manhattan. Why did she live in Staten Island and work in Manhattan? And as a point of reference to people who may not be as familiar with New York, Staten Island is this little island that we kind of have to claim as part of New York, but nobody really likes because no one goes there. Because if you don't live or work in Staten Island, there's not a lot of commerce or other things there. There's really no reason to go to Staten Island if you don't live there. So she lives in Staten Island, but had to work in Manhattan. Our headquarters is in Manhattan. Anyone familiar with New York knows many of the headquarters, many of the corporate buildings. It's when people talk about the city in relation to New York, a lot of times they're talking about Manhattan. That's where a lot of the business takes place. So she had to go from Staten Island to Manhattan every day. Did this for years. I came on board. She's my assistant. She has time and attendance issues straight from the top. Why do you have time and attendance issues? A lot of personal issues. So I said, you know what? What if you worked from Staten Island? We have an office there. Just go to the Staten Island office. She worked in the Staten Island office. Time and attendance issues completely dropped. She didn't have a commute. If she didn't have nearly as much of a commute. Again, one way to get from Staten Island to Manhattan is you got to take a ferry, and it's a 30-minute ride, and the ferry isn't across the street. So it's actually, her commute went from maybe an hour and a half to 15 minutes. And at the same time, her productivity increased. Everything I needed to get done got done. The reason ultimately she was going from Staten Island to Manhattan in the first place, probably guessed it, that's how they always did it. That's where the headquarters was. Well, why not? Why not do something different if it works? So I made the decision as a manager. I put her in a different office and her productivity peaked. We can't be afraid to make simple decisions and simple exceptions to general rules because this is how we've always done things. Again, her performance was better. And I think that's something to look at. I think another thing that we all have to keep in mind as well, a lot of our staff are going to have been dealing with familial changes. And by familial changes, there are some of us who've been taking care of our parents, people who we may not have thought we'd have to take care of at this time because they might have been late 60s, early 70s, highly functional, everything's fine. COVID hit, and something as simple as hypertension, not to downplay it, but something that was manageable, like hypertension or diabetes, has become a lot more concerning. So now when we thought we may be able to take care of a family member, our mom, our dad, our grandma, in 10, 15 years, I hadn't thought about it, we're now thrust into it. That's a huge familial change. Parents have children. I don't know where all of you are, but I can tell you from New York, some schools are open, some schools are open 5 days, some schools are virtual, they're hybrid. There's so many different things going on. And people who relied on having their kids in school during the day have no longer been able to do that. We can now say we want everybody to just come back to work, but people have other responsibilities they did not have prior to this. And I think those are things that we have to keep in mind, as well as a general anxiety about being in a space where you were working from home by yourself to having to commute, go through buses, trains, whatever it may be, to get to work, to be in an office, to be around folks we don't know what their health or vaccination status is. So for a lot of people, there's general anxiety. Next slide. To begin, I always say again, make sure you have clear written policies in writing. If a C-level suite person says, I'm going to leave it to the bureau heads, I would strongly advise bureau heads to have written policies about what they're going to do and to talk to each other. One idea across bureau heads, you're going to have to increase communication at your level. Put together an internal committee, maybe the director of HR, director of maintenance, director of the medical division, whatever it may be. 2 to 3 directors, no, not 2, excuse me, 3, 5, 7. Really need to have an odd number of supervisors, managers, or directors on this committee. The purpose would be, if we're going to have a transition from home back to work, you are going to have people who, for a lot of different reasons, are going to say, I don't want to come, I can't come, I have all these issues. Why does this person get to work? Why does this person get to stay at home? I have to come to work. You put together a committee, 3 folks, 5 folks, however many you decide. You tell the person, hey, if you want to work from home, and these are all just suggestions on some things you can do. If you want to work from home, put it in writing, make a request. Some people will take the initiative to do that. Some people will not. But no matter what, you guys are going to have to come up with some specific plans and make sure that you don't put yourself in a space where someone is going to say, hey, this person got to work from home. I have to come to the office, and it's because of my protected status, whatever that may be. When you have things in writing, when you have a specific and concrete plan, it becomes a lot tougher. Not that someone won't still say that, but again, you have a committee. Everyone, no matter their situation, needs to apply. And that could simply be sending an email saying, I'm requesting to work from home, and this is why. Some people aren't going to take the time to do even that. The committee then decides, based on whatever written criteria you have, whether or not this person's justification is reasonable. Now, even in that, you have to be careful. You have to be consistent. You want to look at performance measures. You want to look at productivity. What you don't want to look at is, wow, you know what? Jane's situation is tough. She's a single mom. I really feel for her. She works hard. She's a good employee. So let's let her work home versus, oh, John, well, this guy, he eats everybody's lunch in the fridge. He, microwaves fish. He does all these bad things. His desk is a mess. He doesn't get any work done. He's not a good employee. He's a bad employee. I don't want him around anyway. You want to stick to performance measures. You want to stick to quality achievement measures. You want to stick to that strategic plan. You want to look at your piece of the pie. What are your goals as a manager? Ultimately, because the buck stops with you, it's going to come back to, I told you as a department head, division chief, bureau chief, I told you to make a decision. How did you come to this decision? What I would also recommend is that maybe you have multiple committees of all the different bureau chiefs. And whenever someone applies, that committee is just any 3 bureau chiefs, but not a chief of the person. If someone's applying, you want that committee to include someone other than that person's bureau chief. So it'll be 3 different people who have no knowledge. So we can say, it isn't because my department head, division leader, bureau chief doesn't like me. The 3 people sitting on the committee, because the committee can be 3 people out of 15 different bureau heads. We're going to pick 3, and the 3 that are going to look at this person's written request, none of them are a supervisor of anyone. None of them are in their chain of command. So no bias there, at least in theory. Next slide. Again, the buck stops with you. So another thing that I think folks really need to start thinking about is, how do we restructure and reorganize our organizations? Do we really need to go back to doing things exactly the way we did? I've worked with an organization or consult with an organization now that has staff who legitimately can do what they do from home rather than from the office. So they've been asking the question, why do I have to go back to the office? We've been doing this from home. It works. What seems to be the problem? Well, the problem is specifically the productivity at home is very low. You are a supervisor, you're a manager. Your role is to supervise and manage. That person who is supposed to make the donuts, make the widgets, do the reports, whatever it is they do, you expect 10 reports a day. Yes, they can write reports from home. they're doing 2 reports a day from home. So that's insufficient. That person needs additional supervision. Or is it a function of, well, maybe you don't need as many staff? Maybe you need to take a look at, and these are the tough decisions people make. Maybe you need to look at, do I still need 10 staff persons based on the level of referrals we're getting, the requests we're getting, the revenue we have? There have been budget cuts. It's been difficult. No one wants to talk about less staff, laying people off, dismissing anyone. But now's the time, if there ever was a time, to make tough decisions about restructuring and reorganizing. As managers, we have a fiduciary responsibility to a degree to our organization. Maybe with less staff, we're going to save money. Maybe we don't have as much office space. Maybe, and I know this is an even tougher call, but sometimes you have to make it. Some staff who are going to work from home, well, maybe we give them a different job description with a different set of duties and responsibilities. And guess what? A different salary, because you're working from home. You don't have the expenses you otherwise had in transportation, in lunch, in even your laundry, your wardrobe. You're not doing the same things. You're working from home. So if you're working from home and you're doing less, why am I paying you the exact salary I paid you before? Now, again, all this needs to be renegotiated with legal and HR. And some people, if they work for the state, you may not have any flexibility in their salary. If they're union, you're locked in, there may not be much you can do. But this is also why there's even a greater reason I say I would have people come back, because I would say I need to give them additional responsibilities. They're at home, they're doing 2 reports, I need 10. We don't have as much coming in. I can't lay them off. We can't restructure. I'm going to give them additional responsibilities, but I can't do that if they're at home. So I'm going to restructure. I'm going to look at how things are done, why they're done the way they are, and see, bottom line, if I can save money or if we can do things differently. So next slide. So ultimately, kind of wrap things up, basically, I think it's important to begin with assessing your organization. Where are you today and where do you want to be? And where you want to be shouldn't simply be a function of where we were pre-COVID, because you were where you were pre-COVID for many different reasons, up to and including that's how we always did things, which isn't necessarily the best reason to go back to doing things that way. An example for any of us who have children know that virtual schooling has its pros and cons, but I think even in New York, they've now decided that they may cut back on snow days and go with virtual schooling. It's time to start looking at doing things differently from the way we've done them for the last 100 years, simply because, hey, it snows outside, school's just closed. Well, now you know you can do school from home. Now you know you can give them this information. That doesn't mean they stay home every day. That doesn't mean they stay home multiple days. But what it does say is school can continue. It'll just happen virtually. We did it for a year. You can do it for a day, and you don't have to worry about extending the school year. One simple thing that they're going to do differently based on how things have happened during COVID. Again, what's the organization's strategic plan? What's the bigger picture? What's the 3 to 5 year plan? What's the annual report look like? And how do you fit into it? It's important to take an opportunity to do some staff analysis. Do I need 10 people? Or because some are not as productive, maybe I only need 7. Maybe I only need 5. Maybe with the way things have gone, I don't need 10. Maybe I need 12 people or 15 people. Maybe I need even more. But whatever decision you make, it needs to be empirically based on performance reviews, quantitative measures, based on data. It's important to keep individual differences in mind with people. People have suffered changes, both in their family, taking care of loved ones. People have suffered losses. If we're going to make decisions at your level, there needs to be a plan, a written plan on how you make those decisions, which is why I gave the example of coming together with different bureau heads, putting together your own form of supervisory committee so you're not making a decision unilaterally. Having a written protocol for how you decide people present to that committee and how that committee is going to make decisions. And this doesn't need to be too complicated, but maybe check with legal, maybe check with HR. If you're given the authority to make these decisions, then come together with your peers. There's strength in numbers when you make those decisions. And ultimately, those decisions may include restructuring and reorganizing your workplace. Next slide. One thing I would be remiss if I did not say, it's important to engage in your own self-care. One of the things we've talked about as leaders and managers is what we're doing for everybody else, how we're directing them, how we're guiding them, how we're keeping in mind the mission, how we're keeping in mind our people, but are we keeping ourselves in mind? Are we engaging in our own self-care amidst the madness? Are we taking time to read, meditate, exercise? We've had a very sedentary lifestyle for many of us for the last year or so. A lot of folks have been eating more than they otherwise would, and they're not moving around as much because you go from the bed to the desk, back to bed, all in a span of about 2 feet. So you're not moving very much. We need to exercise. Diet, we need to look at our lifestyle of how we're eating and what we're eating and when we're eating. Maybe folks need to reach out and talk to someone, whether it's friends, family members, whether it's going to see someone in person, socially distanced, outside, whatever the standards may be for where you are. Maybe we need therapy. It's nothing wrong with talking to someone. Going to see a therapist does not mean someone has a disorder or a mental condition. It means you want to talk to someone and you want them to listen in an objective fashion. Maybe we need to explore our hobbies, because for the last year, there hasn't been our running club or our tennis club or a hiking club or biking because we've been indoors. Maybe this is an opportunity to get out and about. But whatever you do, lead from the front by example and to standard. We are the managers, we are the leaders, we set the example for everyone else. With that, I always say, I do not ask my staff to do anything I will not be willing to do myself. I'm not going to ask my staff to come into the office as I work from home. I'm going to have to take and make sacrifices that I wouldn't necessarily ask them to do, because that's leadership fundamentally. With that, next slide. Are there any questions? I apologize if I've gone over slightly, but I do want to take any questions if there are any. If there's time for that, though. I know there's a panel and other things.
Yes, we have time in the agenda. Thank you, Dr. Sales, for a wonderful presentation with a lot of really great information, some great guidelines for all of us to make our decisions from. I want to open the floor to comments or questions. If you want to use the Q&A function on your screen, participants, we welcome any questions in that space. And if you just want to chat with your colleagues and say good morning, you can do that in the chat space. So I welcome any questions for Dr. Sales. And well, Dr. Sales, while as questions are coming in, are there things that you can recommend if people have employees that are hesitant to return to the workspace? How can they navigate that kind of situation? If your organization says we're returning to work in some fashion and that employee is resistant, are there some suggestions you can give?
Absolutely. One of the things that I would say is, to really do, again, a couple of things. Begin from the beginning with meeting that person where they are and having an honest and frank conversation about why they don't want to come back. Is it a function of familial issues? Is it a function of your kids? Is it a function of your family? What is it a function of that's saying you don't want to come back, other than I just don't want to come back? That's not acceptable. This is the work, and I'm paying you to do a job, and that job is required for you to do here. That's when we do though, get into this space of, if you're going to make an exception for this one person, is that going to be a written policy that now needs to be extended to everyone across the board? Because you really do not want to get into a space of, Jane asked, so I'm going to let Jane, but then you're going to have disgruntled employees who all say, wait a minute, you let Jane work from home. Why can't I work from home? Now, granted, we can't talk about people's individual situations. We can't do that. However, we do have to be reasonable. We don't have to be fair. Life's not fair. We have to be reasonable, right? Because if we have no reason, we get locked away for being insane because you're not reasonable. So you have to be reasonable, right? So in being reasonable, why are we letting Jane work from home versus telling her to come into the office? Why are we doing that? Is it because she asked and we want to be nice? We want to be friendly? It seems okay. One of the things we have to maintain is, and this is what I get back to, want to keep people in mind, but at the same time, we have a job to do as managers. We have to look at our own departments, the things we're responsible for. Are we meeting standards? And then what are the directives that I've been given? I've been given a directive that everyone has to come back to the workplace.
Mhm.
Jane doesn't want to come to the workplace. I take what she says, I pass it forward.
Okay.
I get guidance, reach out to your leadership.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Sales. Excuse me. We have a question in the chat. How do you document individual differences? Are there specific questions to ask, or do you allow the employee to explain with follow-up from the supervisor?
Well, I would document those individual differences. So when Jane comes and says, I want to work from home because, I have a kid and my kid has special needs, that needs to be written down and something to take in mind if that's something that can be considered. Bearing in mind with reasonable accommodations are generally made for the employee's well-being and their ability to do their job if they have a disability, not necessarily because they have familial issues. Then we have to look at things like FMLA or other adjustments that may possibly be made. But when I say individual differences, everyone is going to come with a reason as to why they can't. The reasons that I don't accept are I enjoy working from home better. What you're saying ultimately is what I'm saying. The question is, what is the reason you're saying you cannot come back to the workplace? What is getting in the way? What is the obstacle you're saying? What I'm not accepting is because I like working from home, because I'm comfortable, because this works for me. What is preventing you from doing it? Not why don't you want to do it? And the individual differences are the individual obstacles that are preventing that person from coming back to the workplace. That's what I mean when I say individual differences. Again, could be a kid, could be a parent, it could be a medical condition that precludes them from getting the vaccine, and they need reasonable accommodations. So there's lots of different variables. We want to document the obstacles, not the person's desires or wants or why they don't want to go back. Unfortunately, it's kind of like I want a raise and I want a lot of stuff, but it doesn't matter.
Yeah, that sounds like my sons all the time. I want. But yeah, we need some justification. Thank you for that answer. So in the comments, we have a question. So we've had a tremendous amount of success, high productivity, and an incredibly low out of office time during this period of remote work. Strongly believe that more remote work has been beneficial to our program, and we have collaborative tools in place that aid in remote work. Agency leadership is pushing us to return to the office. I hate the term return to work. We've been working very hard during this time, just remotely. Outside of what you've outlined today, what other arguments or data can we provide to defend our position? This is beyond a single person. We're talking about an entire bureau. What would you suggest?
What I would suggest is this is where I look at not just productivity, but a cost benefit analysis. If you can show someone, and at some point, again, this gets back to the reasonable point. If you can show someone that by allowing people to work from home, we've been just as productive, right? We've met the mission. And by allowing people to work from home, you can look at eliminating a lease, eliminating infrastructure, and saving this much money. I will allow my people to work from home in this bureau. I will save you $10 million. Now, if I'm going to save you $10 million by allowing my people to work from home, and you're saying come back to work anyway. And again, back to work is relative. We've never stopped working. Come back to the office. I'm telling you, we don't need an office. We can work remotely and get everything done. And again, I'm going to show you some data. Look at how many people called out sick before. Look at how many people are calling out sick now. And that's huge for a lot of people. As I gave the example, when I had a young lady, instead of working in Manhattan, going back to Staten Island, she was closer to home. There was no need to call out. There was no need to do any of those things. So I can show you data on call outs. I can show you data on productivity, and I can save you money because you don't need the same infrastructure. That needs to be written down. And then maybe not just that bureau head, but somebody above them. I'm going to save you $10 million, but you're saying no because politics, right? Everybody needs to be back in the office because if everybody's back to work, then we can say as a nation, look, we're all back. Everything's back. Where did it go? It never left. We were just doing it different. So I think that if people are unwilling to be reasonable, then you don't have much recourse. But I think that what needs to go in your pocket is this notion that, hey, I offered to save you. I wrote a plan that saved you millions of dollars by allowing us to continue the way we did with increased productivity, and you still said no. You'd rather lose the $1 million, lose the productivity because of how it looks. This gives you a different perspective on the organization you work for.
Okay. Well, we have a couple more questions. I know we're going into our break time. So I'm going to share these questions with you. And Dr. Sales, are we able to share your presentation afterwards?
Yes.
Okay. And I'll take these, and those who are on here, I'll take these questions and share them with Dr. Sales, and perhaps we can have a short crafted answer in response. But I want to thank you for all that you've shared with our audience today. I want to respect everybody's time, including yours. And I want to say to you, you really gave a lot of shade to Staten Island. And for those who are from Staten Island, their feelings are hurt. I do understand, and I agree with you. I'm just saying.
Feelings are hurt. I mean, you repping Wu-Tang or something like that. You got
They're
some
from Staten Island. We don't really care. But anyway,
Staten Island. It's like they don't like the rest of New York either. To me,
I know they don't. I don't even know why they're there. They don't even belong. Anyway, moving on. Thank you so much for being here this morning. I've thoroughly enjoyed your presentation. Any additional questions for Dr. Sales, we will try to get those answers included with his presentation, and perhaps we can post it on the PMG site after today. And just again, thank you for your time and your expertise this morning. And I just want to say I appreciate you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate you as well. Because again, we go way back. I'm not going to say how far, but yes, we did. And thank you, everyone. I'm happy to be here, and would be happy to be invited back in the future. Thank you, everyone, for your time.
All right. Thank you. And I will send us into the break. Or I'll turn it over to Tashawn, and Tashawn, you can give us some direction from here.
Basically, everyone can take 5 and come back at, I believe, at 10:45, 10:50. Actually, come back at 10:50. And we will start with the panel discussion.
Great. And Tashawn, if you could just go ahead and put Karen in as, if you could elevate her to panelist and then elevate her to co-host.
Yes, I'm trying to find her name as we speak.
She should be at the very bottom of the panelist list, the participants.
Okay.
Thank you, Tashawn. Welcome, Karen.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
It'll be great to see your face. It's been a while.
Hey there.
Is Emily here? I'm trying to find her.
Emily Elliott is still on. There's Karen. Hi.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning. Hi, Jim.
How's it going, Karen? It's
Great.
going to be a lively discussion, I think. And Tremaine got us off to a great start.
What are we going to talk about?
Oh, I don't know. What do you feel? Cats?
Cats. We always love talking to you about cats and cute cat videos.
Oh, I love a cat video.
I know. I've been enjoying reading your columns so frequently. That's great.
Thank you. Well, Virginia has given me a lot to write about, that's for sure.
Exactly. We thought it'd be great to, I don't know if stories have started coming about the return to the office, some interesting ones, the really weird ones. So we're going to start with Emily. She'll just give a DHRM overview kind of things, and that'll be great. And then we'll go talk to Darren, or Ivory will talk briefly about what they're doing at DMAS in terms of and we worked with Ivory step by step from, back in March when it was like maybe April, then it was June, then it was, all this kind of stuff. So.
Welcome back, everyone. We will now have Dr. Burke lead us in a panel discussion of what's next.
Thank you so much, Tashawn. It is a pleasure to be with everybody today, and my colleague Linda Pierce and I will guide this esteemed panel through a lively discussion filled with all sorts of interesting stories. And with Dr. Sales starting off, we got us off to a great start this morning. I'm sure everybody enjoyed hearing him, and the questions that came up were really quite good. So please go ahead and put those questions in. We will have undoubtedly more questions than we'll be able to get to. What we're going to do, though, is just introduce our panelists. Linda?
Yes, hello everyone. Thanks for being here. We are so fortunate to have with us today Emily Elliott, the Director of the Department of Human Resources Management for the Commonwealth of Virginia. Governor appointed her in 2018, but she has decades of experience in state government, previously from VDOT, where she was really identified as a change agent there. So Emily, thank you for being here. We also have Karen Michael, a dear colleague and partner with us. She's a very familiar face to the Commonwealth. Many agencies rely upon Karen's expertise. She is an employment attorney, HR expert, and is going to help lead us out of trouble as we navigate this rocky terrain going back into the office, not back to work, but back into the office. Then we have Darren Moore. Darren is the Director of Planning and Finance at the Department of Wildlife Resources, previously Department of Game and Inland Fisheries. He's also the president of the Virginia Executive Institute Alumni Association, of which we thank him greatly for his support. Darren came to Virginia several years ago from Kentucky, lifelong nature advocate and wonderful leader, big operations background and planning. And we thank you for being here. And we have Ivory Banks. Ivory is the Chief of Staff of the DMAS, Department of Medical Assistance Services. Ivory is a go-getter and makes things happen wherever she goes, always with that beautiful smile on her face. We've worked hand in hand with her over the past several years on many, many important issues, and she's really bringing positive change to the agency and beyond through her amazing networking ability. So thank you, Ivory, too. Thanks to all of you for being here.
We've had the pleasure of working with Ivory on multiple iterations of the return to the office plan. I think at this point, it's almost like, oh, we'll see. So we'll talk to him about that. And Darren has launched an entirely new career in real estate as a result of some of the changes that are coming up in terms of the office. But Emily, if we could start with you, and just to give an overview from DHRM's perspective, this is certainly an interesting time to be leading the organization on multiple levels. But if you could just talk to us from your perspective about where you see things now or where you see things going in terms of this return to the office.
First, thank you, because you're right. This topic is a hot one at that. And some days we all just want to throw the hands up and we'll see. But I will say, I appreciate every time anyone on here has caught themselves saying return to work. Because what I am an advocate for, if nothing else, is supporting the concept that people have been and are working, some of them harder than ever before. So this really truly is about returning to office. And honestly, for me and for us, the message is it's really even bigger than that. Because whether you're talking about remote work, telework, alternate work locations, right? We have all these different terms. We're really talking about long-term abilities to attract, engage, develop, and retain talent. And it's about being competitive in the future workforce. So, for DHRM, we're really trying to put the focus on work being what is done, not necessarily where it's done. And I think that's a message that we really need to continue to support. So we obviously have a significant opportunity in front of us. We have an opportunity to really rebrand and redesign the public sector work experience. We've had a telework policy in place in the Commonwealth since I think 2008. Some areas used it more than others. So this is really just a great opportunity to take all that we've learned in the next year and not to undo it, but to learn from it and go forward. The one word you'll probably hear from me the most today is about flexibility, because we know that the response and returning to office is not going to be a one-size-fits-all approach. And that's where there's the challenge. And there are very much some leaders and agencies want a very prescriptive, directive policy and procedure and guidelines. We know that we don't all have the same mission. We don't have the same workforce, and people don't have the same needs. So it's going to be about flexibility. One thing I always start my conversations with is about keeping the focus on the mission. And I think Dr. Sales said the same thing. What's in your strategic plan? What are your services you're trying to deliver? and making sure that your constituents have access to those services and to the people that deliver them. And that's gonna remain key throughout our conversations on plans that are developed. I also want to say, and another key point for us is, whatever we put in place today does not mean it has to be the same thing we're doing 6 months from now or 12 months from now, because we are all learning as we go in this process, and we're likely going to make mistakes, or we're going to make decisions that have to be changed. So when we think about where we are today, let's think about what are some short-term decisions, and then what are more long-term decisions going forward, and realizing that that should be okay to know that we may have to test some things and pilot some things, and some situations may not work out more than others. We still are operating under a public health emergency, although all of us, I'm sure, are watching our emails and our Twitter accounts to see what happens, if anything, today about changes that might be announced. So as people are focused on return to office, I have to say, don't forget, right now, we still have those emergency standards in place, and we still have to comply by those rules. And I think that's critical, because it certainly should and will impact some of the short-term decisions that might be made. Obviously, we're watching a lot of things. Again, I mentioned the ability to attract and retain talent. That's going to be critical going forward in the Commonwealth's workforce. We already know we have some areas, high turnover, retention is going to be a challenge. And are we looking at potential a wave of retirements forthcoming? I mean, a lot of literature you read today says that that's a great possibility. Dr. Sales mentioned pay. That was interesting. I made a few notes around the comments he made around assigning more work and paying less, or something like that. I think we'll have to explore that a little deeper. But obviously, one of the things we are seeing are more and more folks interested, or employees moving out of state. And so that's kind of a whole nother element and dimension to this conversation, and the impacts that's going to play out going forward. And then, of course, how do we provide more education, learning support, not just for the managers, but for employees in managing remote workers, managing this hybrid environment. That's going to be a critical role, I think, for DHRM. And lastly, I think we already have several agencies that are working with us on looking at our telework policy and seeing what additional changes that we might need to make going forward. I guess to sum it up in the intro, this really is, we're talking specific return to work, but you can't have that conversation without really focusing in on the health and safety and the mental well-being of the employees that we're speaking about. And we know that's going to require a lot more and frequent and transparent communication between managers and employees, maybe more so than ever before. So we're excited to be part of that conversation, and looking forward to hearing from the agencies represented here today, as well as some of the challenges that we know we're going to face, and seeing what we can do to be a partner going forward.
Excellent. Thank you, Emily. Appreciate that excellent introduction. And we do have a question too, which is if we could get your input on this, and certainly we'll want to hear from Karen in terms of the legal aspects of this. But Don's asking about, with the CDC unmasking guidance for vaccinated person and their privacy requirements and issues here, how are managers supposed to determine if an employee is vaccinated and eligible to return to the office without the face mask? This is going to be a hot topic. I know it's been a very quiet political decade, so I don't anticipate any unusual reactions. So any guidance from your perspective?
I think the quick answer right now is we're still under a state executive order and mandate through the governor's office to require masks in facilities. And unless I've missed a communication in the last 24 hours, which could easily be possible, that mandate still exists. So I think that, that's the piece we're all a little bit anxious to hear today. When some changes in Virginia are going to be announced.
So as of now, if you're in the office, you should be wearing a mask.
My understanding. I'm still seeing all the signs posted on the doors and places I traveled at least yesterday evening. No, I haven't left my house today, so that's all changed overnight, which we know things happen fast, but I'm not aware of any changes.
So if the Commonwealth follows the CDC though, and does does take those restrictions off, Emily or Karen, do you have any advice for the question posed by the panelists? Because it's a tricky one.
Well, the emergency standards that were issued they actually don't expire, they're permanent. And the only time that they expire or go away is within 15 days after the governor lifts the entire state of emergency. And according to my sources of somebody who sits on the board, there are currently no plans to meet. The emergency standards that were implemented don't even mention the word vaccine. So the concept of vaccines, when this thing went permanent, which I objected to at the time, and I'm happy to have this recorded because I think it's a big mistake during a pandemic to have anything called permanent, because stuff changes rapidly. And this is a great example of where we're not able to be flexible, because now we have these very rigid standards in place. Things are moving very quickly. And I will also point out that the emergency standards issued by the Codes Board are inconsistent with Executive Order 72, because the Codes Board rules, the Virginia Department of Labor and Industry rules, say that you have to only wear a mask if you can't social distance. The governor's order says you have to wear a mask when indoors at all times. The governor's website says, consistent with the recent CDC announcement, if you've been vaccinated, you don't have to wear a mask in certain situations. So there is an enormous amount of inconsistency. I think it's dreadful to be a business right now in Virginia having to deal with all these different inconsistencies. Mentioned to the governor that we kind of need some real guidance here, because people are flying by the seat of their pants. You can absolutely, by the way, require that an employee demonstrate proof that they've had the COVID vaccine. We know that because the EEOC says it's true. There's nothing out there that says it can't be done. So the only thing that I can see that would have been a hindrance would have been the EOC on disability. And the EOC has said that it is legal to require proof of vaccination. And when we do return to the office, I think that that's probably going to be something that employers are going to expect if they're going to have different standards for people who are vaccinated, who are not vaccinated. One of the reasons that one of my clients, for example, is requiring currently proof of vaccination is because they're having employees request to travel. And they're saying, in order to allow us to grant your request to travel, we are going to require that you show us proof of vaccine. The other reason I think is legitimate to require proof of vaccine is because currently people who are vaccinated do not have to quarantine. And as I understand it, under Virginia's rules for state employees, there is payment to quarantine. And there might be some incentive for that, I guess, to quarantine for payment purposes, to be paid to quarantine. You know, the FFCRA was that federal law that required people to be able to have some sort of paid time off if your kids were in school and you needed to be with your kids or you had to quarantine. That expired December 31st. There's a voluntary, employers can voluntarily be doing it through September 30th now, but most employers have said that's just too much, we're not doing that. So there is an incentive for employers beyond the mask situation to require that people show proof of vaccinations. There's a lot of controversy about that. Employees don't like it, but I mean, it's kind of like the employers are just trying to do the best they can to not get sued, because there's an enormous amount of risk aversion on employers right now. So I do think that you can require proof of vaccination. I don't think this is just about mask wearing. I think it's about other things. And I hope that the governor comes out with some clarity, because as it stands now, we're not in a great situation in Virginia to be able to quickly adjust to what's happened, because we have these code standards that are, quote, permanent and can only be removed following the entire emergency order being lifted from the governor.
Wow, thank you. That's a lot of information to absorb all at once.
A lot going on.
Yeah, a lot of complications. If we can turn to Ivory, because PMG has been partnering with DMAS, as we've seen the first hope of Operation Homecoming, and the second hope of Operation Homecoming, and the third, and now I don't know, Ivory, we may be at the fourth or the fifth. So can you give us kind of the DMAS perspective as far as returning to the office?
It's funny, Linda, because at one point we started calling it Operation Nevermind, because it was just, it's like, you know, we're trying to come back, but, you know, it's not cooperating with us. So, and just a little background, PMG has been amazing helping us with this initiative, as well as running it by DHERM and our secretariat too. What we did to kind of put together Operation Homecoming was we sent out a survey to our staff to kind of figure out their comfort levels of coming back. And PMG did a lot of live trainings and a lot of live sessions with our folks to see, you know, what the feelings were excuse me, how things were working out during the virtual times and everything. And that's how we kind of put together the Operation Homecoming Plan, along with CDC guidelines, the executive orders and things like that. And some of the things that we have in there are, what to do when you come back, who to escalate items to, because one of the things that we are foreseeing is, employees saying, hey, that person doesn't have their mask on, or hey, they're breathing on me, or, I've seen them at the refrigerator, or things like that, as well as some of the stuff that we're providing as far as employee toolkits with PPE supplies and things like that, and health assessments, all types of things. So right now it has probably hit its 10th iteration at this point. And we are planning to have, excuse me, executive leadership come back in June for a teleworking schedule. We all won't be in the same office all the time, but we are going to start trickling back in executive wise in June. And then we have, excuse me, allergies are just doing the most today. But we also have our COOP folks coming back in August. And those are the people that are found in our continuing operations plan. Those that could, teleworking is there, but it wasn't as ideal, to get their job done. And then in September, the rest of our workforce will come back, because we wanted to take in consideration the virtual learning for children. A lot of folks are still, kind of up in the air about what's going to happen with the school year and things like that. So we wanted to kind of give them some room to come back, excuse me, when they could. And then also we're kind of changing our business model. So during this time, we found out, a lot of things can be done virtually, where before we were pretty much an agency where everyone came in the office, but a few people telework. So we're switching it up now to say, okay, who actually needs to come into the office? And so we actually did a call out to all of our employees to say, hey, do you feel comfortable? What does your new teleworking schedule look like that fits where we are now? And we actually have a agency spreadsheet that denotes all of our employees, including wage and any contractors, of when they'll come back into the office, as well as what days they'll work and their hours. But we only have 25% of our agency coming back during that phase of September, only 25% right now, because like I said, historically it's always been this is what we've always done of, can people work at home, how productive they are and things like that. And we've seen, the productivity levels go up. We've seen that, but we've also seen some burnout from sitting, at your chair at meetings all day and things like that. So we wanted to kind of make a hybrid option for our employees, because one size fits all doesn't fit every employee right now. And people's comfort levels, regardless of the vaccinations, are still varying. One of the things that one of our employees brought up, which was a great feedback, is that, some folks are in the vaccination phase. I've lost people, family members to COVID. So I'm still in the COVID phase. And, and that's a thing that I think all agencies should take in consideration, that, it's a new normal. None of us know what this looks, none of us knows what this looks like. So we have to take our employees, feedback into consideration, but also the business need. So we went through a rigorous process with that, and I can't say that it was easy. Some folks were like, nope, I'm done for this year, and we had to balance that with, okay, this is your workload. How productive are you being at home? And can this function, still stay virtual and still provide the level of service to our members that, is required? So it's been a labor of love, going back and forth with these plans. And I've already gotten questions as of yesterday when the CDC released their guidelines. So thank you, Karen Michaels, there, of now what does this mean for us? And I'm like, okay, we're still under executive order. It means nothing for us right now. But I think that's going to be, a huge conversation to have, because, even within our executive leadership team, we're like, okay, how do we not infringe upon people's rights, but how do we know who's vaccinated? And, what do we do in that space? And I guess, everybody knows employees talk to each other. They talk about everything. And this is not going to be a easy topic to cover. And we probably will see Karen Michaels again after this, and PMG, when we trickle back in. But it's a hard situation to kind of balance. It really, really is. And we have 530 male, but lots of wage and contractors, and making sure that everybody, follows these guidelines that we're putting out. And we're actually making it mandatory to have a what we call the Operation Homecoming training that our talent development group actually came up with based on the plan that will go in VLC that they have to take to say, hey, I acknowledge this. I attest that I have been trained and that I am aware of what's in the plan, but you're still going to have those folks that are, still pushing back, and those folks that are still like, I'm still not there yet. So I will say a lot of communication and outside help, helps a whole lot. Like I said, PMG has been very helpful there, and, just trying to get the feedback, because what you don't want is to be inequitable on who you're bringing back versus, someone else. So that's a few things that we have done. But again, I'm imagining in the next few weeks, we'll have another version of Operation Homecoming that will be coming out based on, whatever the governor says during his press release or anything that changes. It's steadily changing. But I will say no one size fits all. That's where you make a huge mistake of pushing people either way. It's just trying to figure out what works best for your staff, but also what works best for your agency. And I do look forward to a conversation on the teleworking piece. We are getting a lot of requests to move out of state because we've been virtual. Also, as we're doing hirings virtually, a lot of folks are like, hey, since you're full-time teleworking right now, am I able to stay in Florida? And we're like, we'll get back to you on that. It's difficult, for our benefits team and also our fiscal team because of the taxes and, the different things that, are different from state to state. So I would be interested in getting, some feedback there, because we are getting a lot of chatter at that point. And also I'll close out by saying that PMG will be coming back to have another conversation and training with our team as well on, where we are now and, how folks are feeling now. And Karen Michaels will be coming to do performance managing training for us, because that's a huge thing. How do you, performance manage someone that was in the office for 1 year, for first part of the year, but then virtually, the latter part of the year when you're supposed to look at the totality of it. So just trying to block and tackle as we can and be as agile as we can with our staff, because we don't want to lose them, but at the same time, we have a business need to fulfill.
I love that, Ivory. You were one of the first ones that we heard of that did that switch and basically said, it's not about justify that you can telecommute, or telework, but justify why you'd have to come back. And that inversion is certainly huge. And Darren, you have at DWR, you have a lot of issues to consider, not only in the office, but you have conservation officers who have been in the field the entire time and engaging with the public. Can you talk about what you're looking at there at DWR?
Sure. Yeah. And thank you very much, Jim and Linda and everybody on the panel and everybody in attendance today. I'll say too, in addition to people taking notes and learning from this particular session, it's always good to reach out to others, in the state, in the Commonwealth, to learn of ideas. Ivory was actually one of the first people I called, and a lot of what she started doing, we tried to model here at DWR. So steal ideas, stealing is perfectly legal in this particular situation. So definitely do what you can to reach out to other people. Jim and Linda and PMG have done a great job of kind of organizing a number of us into kind of a think tank operation as well, just to kind of have these conversations. And it doesn't have to be anything formal. It can be definitely informal. So I encourage everybody to do that too. But with regards to DWR, yeah, we've actually when this whole thing started, we were DGIF, so we've grown considerably since that time. But we have, kind of continued to do a lot of the same things that we were doing before, simply because our officers, our conservation police officers, but also our field biologists, our scientists in the field, our educators in the field, in large part, were able to continue doing a lot of their same functions because they were outside and they were engaging with private landowners. They were engaging with our hunters, our anglers, our boaters, our wildlife enthusiasts out in the field. And they obviously had to take certain precautions. We had to make sure that we centralized the purchasing of PPE early on. We provided lots of different communications and guidance on terms of what is different now and what can continue. But we were able to, in large part, continue doing a lot of what we had done prior to COVID-19. What the other thing that really helped us is really, and I've said before, technology was our friend well before COVID, and it's definitely our friend now. We are obviously trying to leverage as much technology as possible and trying to be innovative, as Ivory has indicated and others have indicated here. We had over 90% or about 90% of our workforce already had laptops. So we were able to, on literally day one, send everybody home to work. And now we had, as I'm sure some agencies also did, we had our struggles trying to make sure we had enough VPN connections and enough of the other additional technology offerings that were available. But, we worked through that. We prioritized people that needed those particular tools to make sure they could function. And fortunately, a lot of employees access web-based systems that don't need those additional tools. So it's been a learning opportunity for us to kind of rethink, similar to what Ivory said, who needs to come into the office. We also looked at that. We also looked at who needs certain tools, certain techniques, certain accommodations in order to perform their same function. But I'll say also, another technological example, kind of piggybacking off of what Ivory and DMAS were doing. We early on started looking at ways to make sure that our employees could fill out the symptom checkers that were required per the regulations and per the guidance policy. And we, contracted with a software vendor to do that very thing, so that nobody had to go into an office to fill out a form. Nobody had to fax something. Nobody had to try and turn a Word document into a PDF. It was an online system that was very easily accessible through the website, through their mobile app, through the phone, et cetera. And it gave an assurance at a comfort level to everybody that that we were following all the guidelines, but we were also making sure we ensured employee safety and also our constituent safety. I mean, keep in mind, I mentioned earlier, we were meeting with landowners, we were meeting with our constituents, we were meeting with other vendors and sister agencies, and some of those were virtual and some of them were not, but they were all socially distanced and they were all protected. So that's something that we did a lot of. I was also saying, we haven't talked a lot about it yet, but I'll say not only prior or going through COVID, but going forward, communication is key. We were, I think our department leadership did one heck of a job in communicating consistently, regularly, and provided somewhat of a stability to our workforce, because they could almost expect to get some type of communication, some type of update, even if the update was keep doing what you're doing. Thank you for all your hard work. It was almost welcomed communication to make sure that, yes, something like happened last night or yesterday, the CDC comes out with another guideline or they hear about a different particular approach, making sure that we account for that and communicate, what's changed, what's not changed, and just keep that up. And I think that's going to be key going forward as well for us, is make sure we are inclusive, make sure we are communicating. And I'll say this lastly, well, two things. One, we did try to focus on function, not title of a position. We looked at who could do what. Honestly, I'm in my office right now. My mask is right here, just so Emily's aware. But my door is closed and nobody else is in my office. But when I'm here really to support a particular function that has to be done in the office. There's many days that I can work remotely and do my job. And like I say, title means absolutely nothing. We continue to run our mailroom operations, our dispatch center here, and those staff by function obviously needed to be on site. They could not perform their jobs remotely, but we wanted to make sure that they knew how important they were and provide additional accommodations for them. And so we did focus very much on function, not title, not where you happen to land in the organizational chart. And then lastly, I would just say that we learned a lot. Jim alluded to the real estate function that I seem to be getting more and more involved in. If anybody needs a 14,000 square foot office space, I have one available. But we are looking very hard, not just because we're coming out of this pandemic and kind of looking to see what's next, but also because, and I think it was alluded to by Tremaine earlier, strategically, budgetarily, what do we want to do? If we can identify or accommodate an employee or groups of employees to telework and work remotely, and how do we use that, that opportunity to streamline another opportunity? If it involves an office that either gets right sized or changed up in some way, shape, or form, does that create savings that can then be allocated to a priority of the department that we've had, but we really never really focused on? And so there's some real opportunities, and I know our department is looking very hard at those. I'll say in one last thing, that we are in no rush to bring people back. We recognize that people are very productive, increasingly productive, doing what we're doing now, and there are some areas where we're gonna want to change and try to do more things in person. But we're also being very strategic and very inclusive in those conversations, and I know those will continue throughout this spring and summer. So, but again, thanks for having me, and look forward to learning more.
I love the creativity. It's one of the things that sometimes we go crazy with in the state is, where's the creativity here? These are really smart people. So it's really wonderful to hear the creative endeavors and approaches to this. People are going to be wanting to hear plans too and share plans, and maybe Linda will need to host a meeting of those strictly vaccinated, checked, verified, and all that to have a discussion with different agency leadership. One of the things, Karen, if I can pull you in, I'm going to refashion a question from Nikki. Imagine I've just traveled to visit family in an area that's a real hot spot in the world for COVID. And I had a great trip, and I'm back in Richmond, and I just got in last night, and I've been vaccinated, but vaccine is not a yes or no 100%. And I just want to come into the office, and my office mates are freaking out because they just know where I've been traveling to. How do I deal with this?
I view travel restrictions, return from travel at this point for a fully vaccinated person. There's just nothing that is out there that says you have to quarantine for some period of time. And I hope that we can I'm a big fan of following the science. I can assure you, day one, I got vaccinated. The minute that my thing popped up and said you can go, I was there, because I think we need to do a better job of actually doing that. Instead of, we cannot allow businesses to continue to succumb to what I view in some cases from coworkers as irrational fears. And at some point, we just have to kind of build up this is the science, we're following the guidelines. Yes, the guidelines in Virginia are somewhat inconsistent. I mean, if I could share my screen just real quick, this is what is on the governor's website right now. So this is what it says. Changes if I've been fully vaccinated. You can gather indoors with fully vaccinated people without wearing a mask. So that's kind of what we have on the governor. So if I'm an employee, I'd be like, this is what the governor has said, even though it's kind of inconsistent with the codes board and it's kind of inconsistent with Executive Order 72. So with all that in mind, I think employers just have to make some common sense decisions and say, employees complain about everything, by the way. They love to complain about what other people are doing all the time. And that's called leadership. You just kind of have the courage to have some leadership and say, okay, I'm not going to require this person to quarantine because you're afraid. You can stay 6 feet apart from this person. You're not required to work on top of them. And, I think that that's going to be a more relevant discussion. I've never thought that these quarantining after going out of state, I've always thought that was a weird thing anyway, because there's COVID everywhere. And you're assuming that person's not taking precautions. They could get it so anyway, I've not been a big fan of that rule anyway. And in some cases, employees love it because they're getting 2 weeks of vacation, essentially paid. And so I've just never understood it, really. And so I would tell that person sorry, the person's fully vaccinated. We're not concerned. We're following the science. And I, still continue to mask as required by the governor when it's required.
Great. Thank you, Karen. Thank you for that. And please do continue to put your questions in the Q&A. We do have another question here. It says, if we have positions, employees that we determine are suitable for teleworking and live a good distance from the office, when do we need them to come in for a meeting here and there? And do we need to pay them for travel? So questions about whether or not they can be compensated if they're required to come in from time to time for a meeting, if they could pay for travel. And then this also brings up other issues like what do we do with full-time telecommuters that need parking or need office space or things like that. So let's take Amanda's question and then broaden it, specifically the travel pay and then other considerations for that hoteling concept. Anyone?
Look, I'll try to jump in, but I'm not going to claim to be an expert without having to go read the related policy, because there is a provision in their policies around your designated work site, and there's a term for it that just right now cannot even get in my head. You know, so I would say look at the policy and see if it's applicable to that situation, which it would be, because if you're going to you know, you have to designate like that primary work site, and then the rules will apply around it. So there's probably more detail that would be needed around this specific case. But I'd say there are guidelines around that. And if that's still a question that we don't have an answer to at the end of this that you feel comfortable with, you can always, you know, either go to your fiscal or your HR team and ask that question, or send it to DHR's policy box, and we can put the official, formal, right worded response back.
I would say that this is a very good time to determine what the essential functions of a job are. And I think that EWPs, they're very big sometimes they're super specific, you know, but what are the essential functions of the job? I had a long-standing case, I'm sure there's people on this call that are familiar with what I'm talking about, that the department required that employees all come to the office on Tuesday. No matter what, you had to be everyone was in the office on Tuesday. And I frankly think that once we aren't worried with social distancing, that on-site attendance 1 day a week is going to be important. I'm hearing from employers, they're losing their sparkle, their culture, you know, new people are starting, they don't even know they're there. I mean, my son is a great example. He had a virtual internship at Genworth for the summer. He didn't know any of these people. He got an offer. He's like, I don't know these. I mean, he doesn't know these. You don't know these people. And so I think if you had a long-standing relationship with your employees and now you went virtual, it's not as difficult, but new people assimilating has been quite difficult for some people. And so it's really important to determine what are the essential job functions. And if an essential function is to be on site every Tuesday for meetings, then that's an essential function of the job, and that needs to be written into the job. And in that scenario, you can have multiple job sites. Your job site can be here and here. It's here on Tuesday and it's here on the other days. And in that scenario, you would not pay for someone to travel to and from work, because that's called the Portal to Portal Act under the Fair Labor Standards Act, for at least a non-exempt person, and you should not be paying for that time because it's basically work to work. So, and actually the Department of Labor, if anybody wants a copy of this, actually issued an opinion letter essentially on this question of when people are kind of going from home to work, to kind of resolve this question. I had another state agency actually have that problem. They were paying somebody to come into the office to take training, and that kind of screwed up the whole pace thing because the hours worked. And so it's really important to designate what are the essential job functions. If on-site attendance is an essential function of the job, and the person says, well, I can't come on site on Tuesdays because I have a disability. Now you've got to get into that whole discussion of reasonable accommodations, but keep in mind, you never take away an essential job function. And in this case, the EEOC, this person sued multiple times with the EEOC and filed 1,800 grievances. And that person, the EEOC, said over and over and over again, if the essential function of the job is to be on site at work on Tuesday and you can come to work on Tuesday, you're no longer qualified for your job. So of course she would call out every Tuesday and try to take her leave every Tuesday. And so, you know, these are complicated questions that require a very measured response. I tell people stay the course and stay disciplined in handling these situations, because they can get complicated and they can get wonky, but set yourself up for success on the front end by establishing policy, establishing what the essential job functions are, establishing when we work and where we work and why that's important, and then hold people accountable from there.
Thank you, Karen. And there's a question, and this is going to come up in different ways, about reimbursements, you know, in terms of should you get a stipend basically, or some coverage for utilizing your home power. And, you know, I'm going to be telecommuting or teleworking, and I've got all these additional expenses to pay. Or for other people saying, well, I'm going into the office, I have to pay parking. You know, are you going to compensate me for parking? Like you said, Karen, everybody's going to complain about everything and fine tune all these complaints down to so-and-so gets this and I don't get this. Where's my money? I want to see the extra money in my paycheck. Emily,
Darren,
you could say
the
so many
finance
things.
expert.
Darren's answer is going to be no. What do you think, Darren?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think these are all obviously valid questions. What I think a lot of it's going to depend on the situation and what, and Karen did a good job of kind of talking about writing things down. I think, again, going back to what I said about communication, I think that's very key. I think if it's, you know, if you've relaxed a policy over the last 12 months and you've identified that as an opportunity for a permanent change, then make that policy change. Make it, you know, put it in writing, make sure there's training involved if necessary. Obviously, the Department of Accounts has a lot of good guidelines in terms of reimbursement and honestly, the telework and alternate work location policies that exist now provide for some opportunities for certain reimbursements or accommodating, you know, what an employee might need if working from home. But I will say that what we've tried to do to kind of account for some of those types of examples over the last several months is, you know, centrally purchase whatever we can, and also centrally issue what seems to be consistent with the need to work remotely or the need to work remotely sometime versus all time. The function that particular position has and what you know, what techniques or tools might be available consistently across those functions, and whatever we can do, I think, to standardize and centralize some of that, I think will help the agency and organization going forward. And again, I think that's another reason to you know, be strategic and inclusive and deciding how things are going to happen. You know, we were all kind of rushed into making these changes before. Let's not rush into making some of these changes permanent without taking into account some of these great questions that are getting asked. But I would say, just in terms of travel and reimbursement, DOA is your friend. Make sure that you always look for guidance there. That's what we would obviously do.
I would also just add that I think a good question for employers is whether or not you're teleworking for your benefit or for ours. Is the job function, there's a space for you here. We want you here. If you want to telework certain days a week, then I think you are less obligated to provide all the bells and whistles. But if the person's job by definition, because it works out for us, is to telework, is to be home in your home work environment, I think there's a heightened obligation to provide more tools, more resources for that person who is at home, because that is their job station. That's their permanent work location, essentially. So that's all in how you're working it and how you're adjusting it. I think it is just so important to set up on the front end what the expectations are and why and what's expected, and, you know, not get into this just, it's not a one size fits all. Emily started this with flexibility. You do need to be flexible, but for certain job functions, the expectation of that job needs to be the same. Now, I did have a state agency that asked me one time, well, you know, we have different job descriptions depending on what region somebody's in, because you might have to do more inspections in this region. And I think that's okay. But just generally where we work, when we work, how often we work, all those things generally should be consistent within the same groups of people doing the same job, at least in the same regions.
I would add one other comment too. I mean, think today, we don't have all employees paying for parking. You pay for parking if you're downtown, maybe not 20 miles away. Some employees get vehicles because they must travel, others don't. You know, so I'm like, I think this is going to be, this whole idea of maybe even a stipend for remote workers is something that's come up more frequently. And, you know, we're going to kind of look at that, pay attention to it, and see where we go. You know, right now, I think there's some flexibility in the policies, but we're too early in this to figure out that long-term impact. And it really is going to be around, right, attracting or retaining talent. What's it going to take in the future? Might look different today than it does, like I said, a year from now.
That's a good point, Emily. We have just a few minutes that would love to open up the question about perceived equity or inequity in the differences between people being in the office more and people teleworking a majority of the time. Things such as access to information sharing, visibility for promotions, other things like that. So just love to hear some thoughts about how people are thinking about this as we continue to try to look at equity in all aspects of our work and being.
I'll say, Linda, to chime in for DMAS, one of the things that we did was we went off our COOP plan. You know, that's like I said, the continuing business operations plan has been socialized and it's updated yearly. So we have essential business functions within that plan that, you know, the OLA agency has seen and VDM has seen. And, you know, so we went by the job function too, so we could point to that plan and, you know, to say, this is your function within the plan and this is why it has to, you know, be in the office, or this is why, you know, you can do this from home, because that's something that is not, you know, we didn't just make up. It was, you know, a whole exercise that we went through and that we socialized and provide training so people knew, you know, ahead of time, and they know their responsibilities as, you know, being found in that COOP plan. So that was one of the things that we did do. But then also we did have to consider some of the folks that were most vulnerable. You know, we did have to consider that those folks that did have, you know, underlying conditions, or those folks that with children as well. But I think having something that is already established or something like that, that you can point to, that takes the person out and think about the function itself, is very helpful. And then, you know, what do you need to do your function, right? You know, to Darren's point, we were able to say, okay, you need, you know, everyone had a laptop, and it was already in our policy for the COOP function that you were supposed to take your laptop home, you know, each evening. So when we were getting folks out of the building, you know, folks were used to those things. But then also, what else do you need? You know, do you need another screen to be more productive, or do you not need that? And then also we did a lot of socializing, you know, what equipment was needed. We did realize that having half people in the office and half folks at home, that we would need better conference room equipment, you know, better things, you know, more automation. We automated all of our forms so that, you know, that we wouldn't be, you know, trying to figure out, okay, if you're in the office, you can go take this folder to somebody versus someone that's not. So all of our forms are automated now. But trying to figure out what was needed, regardless of the person, but the job function itself, kind of takes that bias out. But also having that conversation with our division directors to say, tell us why this person has to be in the office. Tell us why, you know, that they have to do this. And it also kind of, when it comes to equipment, you're kind of delving into ADA accommodations too. So you have to take those things in consideration when you're doing that. And one thing we did, I want to mention with parking, is that during this time frame, we allowed people to opt out, to say, you know what, we're not there. If you want to opt out of your parking, these are the steps, and this is what you'll have to do to get it back on. Because we do have some folks that are, you know, have to come in, you know, once a week for a meeting if they're a manager or leadership or something like that. But for the most part, we just focus on the virtual nature to say, okay, even if you're in the office, you know, there is no inequity there. Like you can actually still do the Google Meets, and you can still hear folks and have that transparency. And we have a DMAS dispatch that goes out to all of our employees 3 times a week. So, you know, where information is pushed out so that whether you're in the office or at home, you have the same communication medium there, you know, to help folks. So it's just trying to figure out, like I said, the job function itself. And we're set up a little differently, you know, than most agencies and things like that, because we have a, you know, more member facing, provider facing policy, and then groups that support the agency itself. So, you know, we just tried to kind of figure out, okay, if I was at home, what do I need? If I'm at work, what do I need? But trying to figure out how to balance that from each side. But also it is on leadership to really look at that job function and be able to justify that function, and not just because I want you in the office, because that is a managing issue. If you know, that's not a you know, a business need. You're just saying, I don't want to manage them at home. No, we're not doing that. Like, that's a whole different thing. So just trying to figure out, like I said, what can we do across the board to make sure it's equitable for both, you know, the folks that are in the office, but those that are outside. And then also, like I said, having something to point to makes a difference. I know all agencies are supposed to have a COOP plan, and if you have one, being able to point to those functions, you know, actually says, hey, we've had this, you know, some things may have changed because we learned different things from COVID, but we're pointing to this. It's nothing we're doing right now to be inequitable to you or you. This is what the agency decided as essential functions that have to be done. within the office. And again, within that, kind of having some flexibility for the actual person, but starting with business function.
Excellent, Irie, and just having that objective framework sounds really, really good. And it's going to be a case-by-case basis, as you said, really will be. And a lot of emotions get involved in this. One of the things, we've got 5 minutes, and I just want to tackle 2 issues. One is the hybrid environment, and Diane had a question about hybrid environments, and that pluses and minuses. All have been in hybrid environments, and you're in a conference room, and there's somebody on a screen, they're not in the room. It can be a little weird. I've walked out of a room with somebody on a phone conference call, I totally forgot we were there. So it can work either that they dominate or and the other thing I'd ask at the very end too is I just want to take 2 minutes at the very end, Karen and Emily, to say, what's your best advice for out of trouble and getting fewer cases going up the DHRM ladder so that we basically are effective leaders and managers and don't cross a line that could be damaging to the Commonwealth. So if we could spend just 2 minutes on making the hybrid environment work, Darren and Ivory, I'd invite you from that, and then we'll finish with Karen and Emily on kids out of trouble.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. So yeah, and honestly, I think that's what we are going to be approaching is a hybrid environment. As I mentioned, that's kind of what we've been doing already. So we've kind of had 12 months of experience doing that. And I would just say that, I think the key is, and Ivory touched on this a little bit, is focus on the function, focus on the position, not necessarily the person, but also be adaptive. And I've always told people that, it's good to be flexible, but really what we're looking for is being adaptive. And I think looking at ways to, provide fair and accessible or equal accessibility to training, to opportunities to be involved in different work projects, different responsibilities, make sure the communication is always equal and regular, throughout the weeks or throughout the months. And don't, I'll say too, that this is something we've probably all kind of experienced to some extent already. I mean, how many of us have been a part of a meeting where before COVID, that we were in, certain members were in a room and certain members were on the phone, and sometimes you forget about those on the phone. And so I think working hard to alleviate, that process and providing, opportunities for supervisors and managers to go through additional training and understand different opportunities to make their employees feel like that they're being included and that they're being accepted, whether they're in the office or not in the office. And I read recently, there's a new book called Digital Body Language, and the author quoted, has a quote to which I think really fits, says, reading a message carefully is the new listening, and writing clearly is the new empathy. And I think that says a lot in terms of leadership. We're always talking about listening and being empathetic. And I think empathy is key right now, as it has been for the past 12 months. But I think looking at what we would do normally and what we would do if everybody was around the room, and making sure that we're providing that same direct contact and direct outreach to employees, so that no one does feel that they're not included, or they're not getting the same opportunities as somebody that might be in the office that day, or might be in the office 2 days versus 3 days, or versus 1 day. And so I think a lot of this comes down to leadership training and remembering what we've all learned in various leadership trainings. And yeah, it's a different environment to apply it in, but a lot of the same principles apply. And so I would just advocate for that. And that's what obviously we're going to try to do here.
Thank you, Darren, and thank you, Joanne and Emily, for bringing up the HBR article. That could be found in the chat, which talks about equity in the hybrid environment. All right, Jim, you want to wrap it up with the last?
We
keep out
actually
of
have
trouble?
Emily on for five minutes. So Emily, I'm going to put you on that last close. So Karen, if you could help us keep out of trouble and how to minimize your services. So.
Well, just real quick on the hybrid, I just want to comment on this real quick.
Yeah,
I wrote an
sure.
article about Tom Farrell and when he passed away at Dominion Energy, and about my relationship with him when I was at McGuire Woods. And what I'm worried about with the hybrid, is that when I started at McGuire Woods, I had a really crappy female boss who just was really awful. But Tom Farrell was right across the hall from me. And I would see him in the coffee room and we would chat and hang out and talk and developed a really good friendship. And this huge case came up and he needed someone to lead discovery. And he walked into my office and said, I need you. That would have never happened if I had been remote. It's that spontaneous. And I think that's what I'm worried about with equity. I think that the way we are going to build a more inclusive environment is for mentorship to happen spontaneously. And I do think we need to find a way to do that. How to keep you out of trouble. If you had a really crappy employee before the pandemic, that employee right now is watching Dr. Phil. I promise you that employee is not working. If you had an awesome employee before the pandemic, that employee was up till midnight last night sending emails and was up at 3 a.m. this morning to get other stuff done. That's the reality. What I would say is address your issues. Now, I've been very transparent with DHRM. In the olden days, you used to be able to manage the affairs of your office on your own, and the hearing officer couldn't say otherwise. Some hearing officers don't really agree with that. And in my opinion, EDR has not taken that very seriously. So I can't guarantee that if you do everything right, that on the back end, you're going to have success, because some hearing officers just don't seem to agree with that. So I'm going to try to work with you, get early intervention on these things, make sure your written notices, it's a gotcha game. If your black isn't lined up, if this isn't perfect, it just is what it is. So I'm disappointed with how some things have gone. And I encourage you to continue to try to follow the policy as best as possible, but you can't screw up that written notice. It's got to be, it's a gotcha game. If the date isn't right, if it's just frustrating. So please get early intervention. Calling me when you have a grievance is not as good as calling me before you're about to write the written notice. I'll just say that. And I've been very transparent about this, so I'm not saying anything that Emily hasn't already heard from me.
Right, and that prevention is so important. Great. Emily?
The good news to that is there are very few cases when you look at the entire workforce and all the things that are going well. I don't want us to ever be overshadowed by the few things that go wrong. And so I hope that leaders will also see the opportunity like we started, looking on the front end. My advice is cast a very wide net in the discussions and being sure you're very inclusive and, thinking through all the aspects. And when I say wide net at all levels, all demographics, this has impacted COVID and the pandemic in general, right, has impacted all of us in some way. So cast that wide net, have the transparency, have the communications as we figure out how to go along. And I think as leaders, it's okay to say, look, we're working through this together because we don't have all the answers right now. We are trying to define things that we've not been positioned for previously. So anyway, I do think that article that's in the Q&A is a quick, easy read and offers some sound and solid advice on how to try to make things as fair. It does talk about power and influence and accessibility to people. And I think that's so key. And as a leader, you've got to be much more intentional about those decisions that you're making going forward. So that's my advice. I do appreciate the conversations. I've taken a lot of notes because we are going to try to push out some more guidance and have more conversations with agencies. So, it's good to hear the feedback and the questions. So appreciate being here. Thank you.
And we are so grateful for all of you having given your time so generously to us. And Karen, very kind of you to waive any fees and just volunteer your time. We always do appreciate it. And but we're glad to see that you've stepped forward a bit more or less shy than you used to be. But thank you all for your expertise. Emily, Karen, Ivory, Darren, it's quite a pleasure. And to Sean, we are handing it back to you right on time, which I cannot believe, because this could have gone on, I'm sure, for hours. And it doesn't mean we won't host something. So Emily, if we can ever help coordinate anything at all, let us know. We're here. Thank you all so much.
Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone. And before everybody drops off, we would like for you to take a moment and do a quick survey. If I can share my screen and find it here. Let's see. As you know, in order for us to continue to provide such great topics, we need your support in evaluating our topics today so that we can continue to provide to you all great training that you are interested in. So please provide your feedback. You can use your cell phone to take a picture of this QR code, and that should bring up the survey. And I don't know if you can see the link as well that's towards the bottom of the screen. So either one should work in order for you to do so. But I also wanted to transition a little bit into our business meeting. It's very short because we were asking for nominees for board members. We have 3 vacancies, and in order to continue our good service to our comrades, we want to make sure that we have full board members. So if you are interested in being a board member, would you nominate yourself and let me know? I do have one person that we has submitted their nomination form, and that is Paige Pearson. And I thank you for stepping up. She comes to us from Department of Wildlife and Resources. And if anybody else would like to join our board, if you could put your name in the chat so that we can also contact you or actually swear you in or vote you in today. Let's see. Okay. It looks like we also have Marie Vargo that's interested. Let's see, who else do we have?
And Dan Wolf.
And Dan Wolf.
Yeah.
Great. Now, does anyone have any objections to these individuals joining our team? And Dan and Marie, if you don't mind putting your email in the chat as well, so I can contact you afterwards, I would greatly appreciate it. So hearing no objections, well, let's see. Okay, I saw that. That was funny. We hope your wife won't object, Dan. So putting it to a vote to membership, all in favor of Daniel Wolf and Marie Vargo and Paige Pearson joining our board, I just need you to say yes. See a hand raise. Okay. Great. I see no objections, and I see the majority says yes. Welcome to the team, and I will be contacting you to give you some more information of how to participate. Okay. Also, so this concludes our business meeting portion. Also, I would like to let you know that usually we charge for our annual meeting for our presentation, but this time we are asking for your support. For CMA and VEIAA members, we have opened up a link or donation site for Feed More. So if you so kindly would donate to Feed More on behalf of CMA and VEIAA, we would greatly appreciate it to show your appreciation for this presentation today. And I think if you don't have the link, you could probably go to Feed More and you will see a link for making your donation. And I can also mail it out to you as well. Well, I don't have any other comments or concerns. Anybody else on the panel has anything else they want to say?
I just want to thank everybody for coming out, for participating, and we have some great new members for the board. Dan, Marie, and Paige are going to be huge additions, so thank you so much in advance.
Thank you.
to Shwan, and thank you to everyone that was here and who participated, and for all of your support. I wish everybody stays well.
Thank you, everyone. It's been great having you.
Thank you.